When people hear Jesus say to Peter, I tell you, you should forgive people not 7 times, but 77 times, or as one version says, 70 times 7, a lot of us think to begin with he's just teasing Peter, because obviously he doesn't expect Peter actually to sit there going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to either 77 or 70 times 7. But for those with ears to hear, there are 2 strands of ancient biblical thought which are coming together very significantly at this point. The first is an astonishing prophecy in the book of Daniel in chapter 9, because these numbers, these 7s and these 70s, had a particular resonance for God's people. And in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel prays a prayer and he says, Lord, here we are in exile in Babylon. I have read in the prophecy of Jeremiah that the exile ought to last for 70 years. Well, let me tell you, the 70 years is up, so please can we go home now? And an angel is sent with an answer to Daniel, who says in effect, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is the prophecy is going to be fulfilled. The bad news is what it really meant was not 70, but 70 times 7. 490 years. That's a long time to wait, you might think. But actually, in Jesus' day, people were calculating that 490 years because they believed that sometime nearly 500 years after the exile, God really would do the new thing that he'd promised. He would defeat pagan tyranny forever. He would liberate his people. He would bring justice and peace to the world, and he would come back and dwell in their midst as God with them. And Jesus is saying, Peter, it's time to be the God with them people. It's time to be the 70 times 7 people. It's time to be the real return from exile people. But that 70 times 7 has another echo as well, which goes all the way back to Leviticus 25, that great command that every 7 times 7 years, the people of God would forgive one another's debts, so that if people had got into hopeless debts, there would be this wonderful moment called Jubilee, when they would blow the ram's horn and they would celebrate and they'd have a party, because all the debts would be wiped out. And we who've had credit crunches and goodness knows what, never mind the mountains of debt building up personally as well as internationally, know that actually that idea of release from debts is about the biggest sigh of relief that you could have. And that's what God wanted to accomplish in and through Jesus. Forgiveness is not just me forgiving you or you forgiving me for something wrong we have done to one another. Goodness knows that is hard enough. Desmond Tutu wrote a book, No Future Without Forgiveness, because he'd been living that and putting it into practice through the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation. That's got to be done. It's absolutely central. We can't say, well, we're Christians, but that forgiveness stuff is a bit difficult and we're not very good at it. The answer is that's central. We've got to be about that. But it's something that then must affect how we do church and how we do society. I got very cross a couple of years ago when the governments decided to do for the very rich what they had failed to do for the very poor, to release those multi-million debts to the banks and the big companies when they had failed to do that for the third world countries who were facing, and still in some cases are facing, unpayable debts. We have to be Jubilee people. We have to be forgiveness people. Because, and this is where that parable really bites, if you close your heart to forgiveness, you close your heart to forgiveness. That's the scary thing at the end of that story. The man who refused to forgive somebody else was shutting a steel door in his heart against the possibility he might forgive. But it's through that same door that God's forgiveness comes into us. That's a real challenge for this stage of Lent or any stage. It's the challenge whether we really take the gospel seriously enough to keep that door open and let the forgiveness go in both directions.